shoes and walk among the groups of two. It's not ideal, it's just how we feel. It's a shame we're easily amused. The only cure for this forward motion is to make emotion fly away. The air is cold, but the water's not frozen. I see ripples rolling every day. Cast a stone and hit a hardcore view. Catchphrase of the day is that it's true. There's no coffee talk and only one way to please. It's a shame what you do moves me. The only cure for this forward motion is to make emotion fly away. The air is cold, but the water's not frozen. I see ripples rolling every day. Yeah, I'm not looking for a windswept view. Our change has changed. Nothing's new. Right hot new song that proves. The only cure for this forward motion is to make emotion fly away. The air is cold, but the water's not frozen. I see ripples rolling every day. If I know what we'll do, I'll take this smile. The only cure for this forward motion is this smile. The only cure for this forward motion is this smile. The only cure for this forward motion.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Rebellious 1776. I'm Lynn Hurley, and we normally, as you know, we normally watch a congressional hearing, but today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to kind of talk about what's been going on. So Congress is sort of taking this week off. They are, but they're not. There's not as many hearings. Though the Senate was in session today voting on the foreign aid bills, let's just say bills, even though they've condensed it into one. But, and we'll talk about that. We will talk about what's going on there because it's irritating. It is. But, you know, what happened was what we thought was going to happen. For those of you that didn't know, it did pass. Surprise, shocker. But we're also just going to talk a little bit about kind of the craziness that's been going on lately. Like, have you guys been watching? I mean, I know I watch the news and I pay attention to, politics on X and on the internet and like just a bunch of different outlets because I want to know what to talk about when I'm here with you guys. So I probably watch more than the average person, let's say. But are you guys watching what's been happening even just in the past like 4 or 5 days? It's craziness. It's craziness, like out of control craziness. It seems like a different country that we're in. But it's a little wonky. Not thrilled with it, but we are going to talk about it. And I've got some clips, I've got some things I'm going to show you. So I hope you guys had a great weekend. We weren't here yesterday because, well, let's be honest, because I had a really fun weekend. We were basically at the range all weekend because I got a new gun and it's very fun. So I didn't do anything other than really kind of that. And so yesterday was a day where I just needed to kind of organize, get settled, get ready for the week. And here we are. So we're going to have a good show today. Got lots to talk about. Hope you guys had a wonderful weekend as well. Even amidst all of the craziness that's going on. And wherever you are, I hope you're safe and I hope you're not in the midst of it. So let's get into some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So this took place, I think it was last week. Yeah, this was on April, looks like 17th. Let me pull it up for you. And we touched on it briefly, I believe, maybe in the last episode that we did or the one right before that, where the New York City Council had a meeting and they had immigrants come in and they were basically complaining about one being moved from a luxury hotel into a shelter, and two, they didn't like the free food they were getting. So they were just complaining about how they were being treated, which, I mean, come on. You came to a country illegally, more than likely, illegally. You're getting free food, free housing, free healthcare, IDs, debit card, prepaid debit cards every month. What you complaining about? Quit your bitching. American citizens don't get that. It's absolutely insane. You know my feelings on it. But anyways, this congresswoman had something to say. So let me pull this up and we'll watch it together. Let me make sure I got it all the way over here. Okay, let's hear what she had to say.
But I'd like to say this. In listening to everybody speak and making demands on New York City to do more, how much more are we supposed to do?
Yeah, you tell them.
How much more are we capable of doing? This system is so overworked and overburdened. We don't have the resources that you need to get what you need. I mean, your testimonies move me tremendously. I don't want to see anybody mistreated in any sort of way. But I have to ask you, what motivated you to come here thinking the streets are paved with gold? They're not. They're absolutely not. And you're living through that. Now, we've watched many different people come across this border. The people who have come across this border have come across this border illegally.
Councilmember Palladino,
Yes.
do you have a question for the panel?
I do.
Because we have to move on.
Okay, they're not liking what she's saying.
Everyone, we asked a quorum in the chamber. Now, Councilmember Palladino, if you have a question, please present it. If not, we will move on to the next.
Okay, so what did you guys think of that? I thought that was amazing. So her name is, Councilwoman Vicky Palladino. And I love the question that she says to them, which is, I have to ask you all, what motivated you to come here thinking the streets are paved in gold? They are not. And what she's doing is she's addressing this elitism that these these illegal immigrants have. They just are expecting that they're going to be treated like kings and queens and given everything. And frankly, they're given more than American citizens are being given, that's for sure. And they're still not happy. They're still not happy. And there were hundreds of these citizens that came, or they're not citizens, excuse me, of these illegal immigrants that came. Most of them were from Africa. I'm not sure which countries they represented, but a good majority of them were from Africa. And they were complaining. They were just complaining about the things that they were receiving just aren't good enough. The food is not good enough. Their kids can't eat the food because it's not good enough food. I'm sorry. What do you expect is going to happen? You go to a country illegally where you don't speak the language and you just think that you're going to be treated like royalty? Amazing. Let her speak. As soon as someone says something good, they cut off. I know. Well, I didn't cut it off. That's where the clip ended. But I agree. But yeah, they tried to cut her off because they didn't want to hear what she had to say. And they're, councilwoman, do you have a question? Decorum. Because God forbid somebody say anything with any common sense and these people get offended by it. Well, tough shit. I don't really care if you get offended by it. You came to this country illegally. So you, in my opinion, don't get a say. You just don't get a say. Sorry. You don't. David F. Hey, David. Says Biden invited them. Maybe we should be asking him. Oh, 100%. 100%. And why isn't he hosting them in his Delaware home? Right? He and Mayorkas are flying them over. How come they don't have any of them in their houses? They're not putting any of them up. Ridiculous. So Cal says, but Bob Marley, Kamala Harris says, don't come. I have 2 words for you. Don't come. It's about as strong a warning as when Biden said to Iran, don't. Oh, well, sorry. Oh, so sorry. We didn't realize that was the response we were going to get was don't. So, okay, guys, come on. Let's go change our plans, fellas. Biden said don't. Kamala said don't come. So maybe we should just all stay home, right? Yeah. It didn't work. That's correct. It didn't work. Yes, Uncle, what was his name? Uncle Bozy or something like that. Uncle Bozy, Biden is too occupied to lie about his dad and the fake cannibals and to care about illegal. I know. And then when I think it was Peter Doocy from Fox News was pressing Karine Jean-Pierre, or whatever her name is, the press secretary about that. Why is he saying, and I love him. He was brilliant. And he was like, why is he saying that his dad was eaten by cannibals? And she's like, well, he's very proud of his dad's military service. He's been a big supporter of the military, blah, 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 trying to spin it. And Peter's like, yeah, but he said his dad or his uncle was eaten by cannibals. That's not a good way to go. And she's like, I don't think you should be making light of this subject. Are you for real, lady? The dude said his uncle or great uncle or whatever he was eaten by cannibals. And we're supposed to keep a straight face on that, especially when there's no proof of it whatsoever. His plane crashed in the Pacific. I think he took off from New Guinea. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Oh, Lordy. One thing I can say about Joe Biden is it's never a dull moment. Never. Well, that's not true. There are many dull moments, but the things that come out of his mouth are hilarious. Sad, pathetic, but kind of hilarious. If you can look past the outrage and anger that we feel anytime he says something, they're kind of funny. Eaten by cannibals? Come on. Where's he coming up with this? Can you imagine? Like, what is his head like? What's like the inside of his head like? I imagine it's kind of like the Homer Simpson, you know, when he would like daydream and be like, you know, skipping through a field of whatever with a donut, except for Biden, it would be an ice cream cone. La di da di da. That's what I think the inside of Biden's head is like. I don't know. What do you guys think? Okay. It's just insanity. So the insanity, as I said, the insanity continues. So next we're going to look at, so this is this is Utah's, let's see, hold on. Who is this guy? I think he's a state senator. Let me see. Not a waste to see it. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, this one doesn't say. Okay, well, he's someone who works in the Utah legislation. I want to say he's a state senator, and he's talking about, and he's a Republican, and he's just gushing over their new DEI legislation. It is in a pitiful state. Yeah. So let's look at this because it's just like gets worse and worse. So hold on, let me pull it up. Where is it? Okay, here we go. All right. So this is a Republican state, either senator or representative. I can't remember which one.
Just over a month ago, President Adams and I, along with many of you, joined elected officials, business leaders, and community advocates in signing the Utah Compact for Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. This document clearly states that Utah is dedicated to the principles and actions that create equal opportunity. Government can't solve all of society's problems, nor should it. But where we have determined that it's appropriate for government to act, we can and should do a far better job of building a system which gives people equal access to opportunity, and they are better able to help themselves. During this session and in the months and years to come, let's focus on education, housing, and health in order to become a more inclusive state.
Okay, so he is a Senate candidate, it looks like. I'm looking it up. His name is Brad Wilson. He's a conservative Senate candidate. I'm assuming he works, it doesn't say if it's the state Senate or if he's working in the state Senate. I don't know. He's working somewhere in the Utah legislation, but he is a candidate, conservative candidate for the Senate. Also doesn't say whether federal or state, but regardless. I mean, it's about what I have to say on that one. It's just ridiculous. It's amazing how, especially in an election year, you really kind of start to see what somebody's priorities are, right? And how some of these conservative, I expect it from the liberal candidates and legislators. But the conservative ones, when they come out and start talking about this and praising the things that otherwise they normally would denounce, right? It just goes to show you what kind of candidate that is. So keep that in mind when you're voting at the ballots. If they are caving to these type of progressive ideologies and calling themselves a conservative, then chances are they're just going to do whatever works best in their best interest. So keep that in mind as you're watching this. But again, this is indicative of the ideology that has become so pervasive in the government today and within the society in general. And we're going to talk about that. Yes, we're getting into it again, guys. Those of you who sat through my socialism talks before, yeah, we're talking about it again today. But you're going to see why, I hope by the end of it, I hope you'll be like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's craziness. Okay, so our next candidate for horror is Nope, that's me. Okay, so these are the, so you guys, I'm sure, have seen, if anybody has been on X, or it's probably on Facebook. I'm never on Facebook, to be honest, very, very rarely. So I'm not paying attention to Facebook, but it's on X. It's all over the news. All of the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian protests, these kids that have been completely brainwashed. There's been a lot about Colombia, right, last week, because there was a hearing in the House about the anti-Semitism that's going on in Colombia with these protests. And then, over the weekend, and I think today, was it today that the Yale protests were going on? And yesterday it was, I want to say it was a different college, and I can't remember which one. But Columbia protests have just been like nonstop. So this is something that they were walking down the street during one of these protests, and obviously they were kind of there to counteract them as pro-Israel protests, at least the guy in front of the camera was. But let's just listen to what these brainwashed, if it's a student, what's she saying, or he or they, or whatever their fucking pronouns are. I don't care. Okay, here we go.
Keep it moving, you Zionists. Keep it moving, you
We are Hamas.
You're Hamas. Wow. That's a good one. You're what? You're Hamas?
Yes, we're all Hamas. Hey, I'm Hamas.
That's you.
No!
Well, somebody needs some anger management classes first and foremost, but this is the state that these kids are in. They are so brainwashed at this point in time. And people have pointed out things like, if you've seen the pictures of the tents they've been camping out on the schools, kind of, I don't know, we called it a quad when I was in school, but the green areas, the open, like kind of green grass areas in between buildings. They've been camping out there, but there's all these tents that look exactly alike. There's these green and gray ones, and then I've also seen orange ones. And it's just tent after tent after tent. So the question is, who's funding this? Who's behind it? A lot of people believe Hamas is behind it. Now they've come in, they've infiltrated these schools, and they have just subversively disseminated this information. And they're doing it on TikTok, and they're doing it on X. I mean, I had someone, I said something about not supporting Hamas, and somebody responded to me, which I found funny, with pictures of, like, dead children, dead Palestinian children. Now, of course, nobody wants to see that. But I also recognize what tactic you're using here, like, ma'am, if you're a ma'am, really. But this is what I think they're doing to sort of play on the emotions of these people. And a lot of them are college-age kids, right? And they're impulsive, and they're reactive, and they're emotional because they're college-age kids. They're young. They're, late teens, early 20s. They're reactive. That's just where they're at in their development. And so they're impulsive, and they're quick to jump on the bandwagon without actually doing, hi, Cindy, bye, Cindy, without actually doing any research into this. Yes, there are women and children that have been killed in Palestine, but there are women and children that have been killed in Israel as well. Like, this is a war. There are casualties on both sides. That's war. War is not pretty. It's not wonderful. It's not humane. That's just the reality, but they're using this to prey on these kids and to get them to try and come around to their side of what is right? They're using this humanitarian crisis, and preying on these kids' emotions. All right, let me pull up. There was another one that I saw on, I think this was actually on MSNBC, surprisingly, MSDNC. There was a new NYU professor. I think maybe NYU was one of the other schools that had these protests. And he was talking about this very thing. So let me pull this up and we'll watch that as well. Where are we? I don't know why it comes up. Here we go. Out of order on here. Oh, nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Sorry. I have them all in order, and I don't know why it's coming up out of order for you guys. So give me just a second to find it. It's really weird. Why is it not? Here we go. Okay, this is it. All right.
And I do think there is a double standard. I walked by NYU last night. What I saw was peaceful protests. But I can tell you, if I went into the NYU square with a white hood on and said, lynch the blacks or burn the gays, my ID would be shut off by that night. And I would never work in academia again. There would be no need for the words context or nuance. I wouldn't be protected by terms like First Amendment or free speech. I would be out of the world of academia. It seems like we have a double standard when it comes to hate speech, as long as it's against Jews.
And we're not just talking about the exercising of free speech and protest, which we agree people have, and there's spaces on campus for that. It's what they're saying. It's the harassment of Jewish students. So what is that? Why is there that double standard? Because of course you're right. You don't even have to say it out loud. If these things are being said about black people or gay people or Latinos or Asian or anybody else, forget it. Shut down the school. Everybody's expelled. Why is there still that double standard?
I think it's complicated. I think, one, young people have a healthy gag reflex on what people our age think. And I think that's healthy. Two, I don't think Israel has draped itself in glory over the last 20 or 30 years. They've shifted from being kind of the David to the Goliath. I also think that incorrectly students on campus conflate the civil rights movement with what is going on in Palestine and have digressed, unfortunately, because of an orthodoxy promoted by me and my colleagues that there are oppressors and oppressed. And the easiest way to identify oppressors is how white and how rich they are, or fairly or unfairly. Israel is seen as ground zero for whiteness and how wealthy they are. And then
keep that in mind when we're talking later. What he's saying is spot on, how these children are being taught about oppressor versus the oppressed.
What might sound paranoid doesn't mean I'm wrong. I think we are being manipulated, specifically youth, through their frame for the world is TikTok. And if you look at TikTok, there are 52 videos that are pro-Hamas or pro-Palestinian for every one served on Israel. I think that we are being manipulated. I think Americans are easier to fool than convinced they've been fooled. But if I were the CCP, I'd be doing exactly the same thing. I think social media is sowing division and polarization in our society.
Okay, so I think what he said was really good. He's spot on. He's spot on. And it was interesting. Did you notice how one of the first things he said was, if I was out there protesting and I was saying these things about black people or gay people, they would basically just destroy his life, right? That he wouldn't have any First Amendment rights. And he is 100% correct in that there's a double standard going on here. But what was really interesting was how the news reporter reacted, like, well, of course, if you were saying this about gay and black people, like, that you would be treated differently. That goes without saying. He said, like, you don't even have to say that out loud. In other words, that makes me very uncomfortable. So please don't say that out loud. So to me, I thought that was brilliant that he said it out loud, and he was just kind of like, look, I'm just going to put it out there. And I'm like, yes, thank you. Because just put it out there. Like, I am so sick and tired of being careful about every little thing we say. And people are being so offended so easily that you can barely talk. You can barely talk because somebody's always going to get offended. Lord knows I offend. I don't even know how many people every single time I come on here. I don't care. Because it's time for, and my kids hear this from me, and I'm sure they're sick and tired of hearing it from me, is that you got to toughen up. Like, you can't get so offended by the things that people say, right? People are allowed to say anything they want. Doesn't mean that there's no repercussions about saying certain things, but we do have freedom of speech. And you got to toughen up a little bit. And these younger generations, I would say millennial on, they're so easily offended. Though the millennials, I think, are sort of coming around. As they get older, they're coming around and realizing that, yeah, you can't get so offended over every little thing. Like, you just can't live life that way. It's not possible. Sometimes you just got to adult, right? But so I thought that was awesome. I was sort of surprised to see it on MSDNC, but hey, great that they did. I don't think that changes the Democratic stance on things. And somebody had said it, I think it was Snoop who had said it, which was that Omar's daughter, what's her last name? Omar Ilion, is that her name? I think so. She's a congresswoman. Her daughter goes to school at Columbia, and she was arrested. They arrested, I think, 108 people on, it was either Friday or Saturday. Maybe it was Saturday, sometime this weekend. And she was one of them. And she comes out afterwards. Of course, it doesn't seem to be any real repercussions for these kids. They get arrested. They probably get told, like, knock it off. And they release them. And then they go right back out and protest some more. Just clearly they don't care. And she was in an article on Teen Vogue saying, like, oh, we were just arrested for sitting out there singing songs and, having a meal together. That's not what you're doing. That's not what you're doing. And we all know that's not what you're doing. We have evidence and we have videos. There are so many videos of what these people are saying. And they have, like, the Jewish students are saying, we don't even feel safe. And in fact, Columbia today announced that they're going to a hybrid version of school for the rest of the year because these Jewish students don't feel safe. And so they can't go to class. Sometimes they're even being blocked from going to places. And so instead of actually doing something to protect the students of your school, all of your students, they're just saying, well, we're just going to go to a hybrid model so that way people can go to school. Yes, she was suspended from her school. Omar's daughter, that's right, has no place to live, according to her. Oh, please, come on. She's like the picture of privilege. Her mom is a congresswoman. She goes to Columbia, an Ivy League school. Like, do you really think that she has no place to live? And not only that, but her mom and the squad are all speaking out and supporting her, saying these are all peaceful protests. These kids are being targeted. You're going to tell me that she has nowhere to go? Come on. This is the type of BS that we're dealing with here. It's all spin. It's all about putting it out to make it look like something that it isn't, right? To again, play on people's emotions. Oh, we're just peacefully protesting, singing. No, you're not. When you're saying we are Hamas, and there were people saying that October 7th will happen again and again and again and again, and supporting Hamas and Hezbollah is crazy, because these kids don't realize who they're supporting. They really don't. They have no idea. I've told you guys before, I lived in the Middle East. I lived there for 6 years, and I loved it over there. But it's a very, very different culture. And especially as a woman, it's a very different culture, depending on where you are. Some places are more progressive than others. I lived in Saudi Arabia, which is uber conservative. Though I hear the women are getting more rights over there. So yay, go Saudi Arabia. Like, I think the women can drive there now. But the type of terrorists that are over there, it is so much more violent than Americans can even possibly fathom. When we had 9/11 happen, I had been back in the US for a little over 10 years. And though it was horrifying seeing what happened, I wasn't there, but obviously, those of us that were around, we watched it on TV, we saw everything. I wasn't surprised and I wasn't shocked. I wasn't it didn't rock my world like it did a lot of people. A lot of people were very traumatized from it because they had this misconception that America is impervious to terrorism and to violence. And that's not the case. And sadly, especially with this open border policy, and Lord knows how many, we don't even know how many special interest aliens have come in through the country. And those are people who have come from the Middle East. They go through South or Latin America and come up with Latin Americans and try to blend in with them. But these are people who have potential ties to terrorist groups. We don't even know how many we have in the country at this point in time. And if you've watched any of the hearings with Mayorkas, I've seen it brought up a couple of times, and he always changes the subject and does what he's, he excels at, which is he talks around the answer and never gives a straight answer. But my point being, we don't know how many terrorists are in this country. And I think, unfortunately, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I think Americans are going to see just how brutal these people can be, these terrorists. And I'm not saying all Muslims, I'm not saying all Middle Easterners. Please don't mistake me for saying that. I've known many, many Middle Easterners. I've been friends with them. I've dated some. Like, they're a wonderful, wonderful people. I'm talking about the extremists, who the jihadists, the terrorist groups, right? These are just like any country, and they're within multiple countries over in the Middle East, but just like with any country, any civilization, any group, there are always going to be extremists who are not indicative of the general population. So let's put that out there, because we don't want Islamophobia either. In fact, I did date a guy who was Muslim, from Saudi Arabia. He was over here in the US. He's a citizen here now. And I got to see firsthand how he was treated. And it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And so we don't want any of that either. But to say I am Hamas, or that you support Hezbollah, is these children, because this is what they are. These children don't know what they're saying or who they're supporting. They have been told that they're uplifting a humanitarian cause. And that's not the case. These are terrorists. And they will decimate any one of these protesters if given the opportunity. A lot of them are women that are these protesters. I'm sure plenty of them are gay. And even if you're a white male, you too are the enemy. So everybody is the enemy. If you're American, you are the enemy to these groups. So they wouldn't care that you are protesting for them. They wouldn't care if you said, I am Hamas. They're going to see you as an American. So therefore, you're already satanic. You are an abomination. They would say, okay, well, not only are you that, but you're also a traitor to your own country. So you're even worse than the typical American. And 3, you're expendable. So if you're going to sit there and say you're one of us, super duper, we're going to use you for something that you probably won't survive, because you don't matter. You don't matter to these people. You really don't. And I just don't think they realize just how capable and how violent these people are. I have a video, and I was contemplating showing it, but I don't think I will. And it's not even, it's a terrible video, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot worse out there. But it is of these men who are beating a woman over in the Middle East because her head isn't covered. I'm assuming that's what it was for. It doesn't say why, but I'm assuming that's probably what it was for, because she didn't have a head covering on. And it's just, they're beating her with sticks. And then these 2 guys come up. They come up on this motor car. They get out, and you think, okay, they look kind of like they're going to break it up. No, the bigger one grabs an even bigger stick and starts beating this woman even more. These are the people you're supporting. But they don't want to hear that. And they've been so indoctrinated at this point that they don't even realize who they're protesting for. Like, they just don't realize it. They are playing on your heartstrings. They are showing you pictures of dead babies, and they are saying this is a humanitarian crisis. That's not who you're supporting. You're supporting the people who put those people in that place, in that position. They're using those people as human shields. Why don't they realize that part of it? They are putting the Palestinian civilians in harm's way. Why aren't they seeing that? Oh, did she really? Snoopy says Nancy Pelosi, Nancy. I don't know why I can't say her name today. Nancy Pelosi had illegals in the front yard just outside the gate sometime last week. Wow. Well, speaking of Nancy, we got some videos of her too. And she's going to show us the perfect example of why these Democrat politicians just suck. Like, there's no other way to put it. They just do. Let me show you. There's a couple of them of her. Let's see. Let's start with this one. And this is just, typical Democratic reasoning.
The overwhelming, we don't know how many people have died. We have the Hamas report. Let's accept that it's tens of thousands. 10 would be too many, but tens of thousands.
35,000 seems to be the number at the moment.
I know that's what it said, and let's accept that it's too many, whatever it is. The overwhelming.
So she's saying, we don't really know what the number is. This is what they're saying. It's 10,000 or whatever the number is that she threw up there. This is the report we got from Hamas. So we're just going to take it at face value. Like, what? Why are you just taking it at face value that this is what the number is? And then here's a little bit more of that same interview. Let me go back.
We reject the policy and the practice of Netanyahu. Terrible. What could be worse than what he has done in response? First of all, the exposure. See, his intelligence person resigned. He should resign. We reject the policy.
So we're just going to completely reject Netanyahu. Everything he's done is terrible, absolutely terrible. There's nothing worse. I could think of a lot of people who are worse. She would be one of them. And what do they expect after October 7th? They expect that Israel is just going to be like, don't. No, they're going to retaliate. Of course they're going to retaliate. Absolutely crazy. I have no idea what she's probably drinking. But it's, her talking reminds me of the teacher from Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. Yeah, I can understand that. She's really annoying. She said 35,000, didn't she? How many people in Israel have died? Guess what? If you look it up, I don't know about the number, but if you look up, try to find pictures of people who have died over in Israel, you can't find them. I've looked because I was trying to counter the dead baby picture with, because I know children over in Israel have died as well. You can't find any pictures. They are not on the internet unless maybe you can dig really deep. I tried. I couldn't find any. None. You're going to tell me not one child has died over there? I know that's baloney. But that's what the media is doing. This is how they are trying to manipulate the way people see what is going on over there. Yeah, how many children did Hamas kidnap and use for sex trafficking? And women too, right? They would rape them and then shoot them in the head right afterwards. And then claim they didn't do it. Or they torture them. And they still have people that are hostages. They have American hostages. And yet these idiots are supporting and saying, we are Hamas. Like, you're an idiot. You're an idiot if you think that you are. And look at the way they treat women. The women over there are, it's absolutely insane to me that they are supporting these people. And it's purely, like that one professor was saying, because they just don't know. They have been indoctrinated. They have been taught that, to be the oppressor, oppressor versus oppressed, and that you want to fight for the injustice of the oppressed. And do you know what that sounds like? Because I do. But let me see if I had any other. Oh yeah, there was one other. So this one isn't violent, and most people would say, oh well, this is a peaceful protest. And yes, it is. I would consider it a peaceful protest, but the fact that they're still uplifting the culture of these terrorists is, I'll show you. Let it speak for itself, and you guys can tell me what you think. Where is it? Oh, for goodness sakes, why is it being like this? Here it is. Okay. Now imagine you're a Jewish student who's walking by. These people have been saying, we are Hamas. The seventh will happen again and again. They have pictures of who they're calling heroes who have murdered, and who murdered and separated a 19-year-old murder boy. And this is what they're doing. They're celebrating. Yeah, this is in New York. The kids are just having a grand old time. They're having fun. Look, they're laughing. They're having a great time. They have no idea what they're actually doing. The girls have their heads covered. Do you think if they were forced, if they were told, you have to cover your head, you're not allowed to show your hair, what do you think they would do with that type of information? And if they were being forced to do that, you think they would be celebrating it? No, they absolutely 100% would not be. AP and David Wood visited Israel right after the attack and showed some of the photos of the victims on their channel. Yeah, I mean, there are victims, but you can't find them. My point is that the internet has buried them. So all you can find, even if you like Google or whatever search engine you're looking on, dead Israeli citizens or something along those lines, killed at war. Guess what comes up? Pictures and pictures and pictures of Palestinians who have died. The Israeli ones don't even come up. You have to go through, like, start on page 4. You might see, I saw one picture that had like boxes, like coffins of people who had been killed, I think in October 7th. It didn't even show that many. And we know there were at least, I think, 1,200 who were killed that day. And yeah, that was it. That was it. Everything else that comes up is Palestinian, even if you specifically ask for Israeli. It doesn't come up. Google monopoly is real. You are not wrong, my friends. You are not wrong. Okay, so let's get into sort of the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about today. So what is the point of all of this, right? So why is this happening right now in the US? Like, what started all this, right? Because I don't know about you, but I just remember these pro-Palestinian protests really just kind of started up in the last year, right after, which is weird because it started like right after October 7th. On October 8th, these pro-Palestinian protests started happening. So the day after Hamas attacked Israel, the pro-Palestinian protests, because they're the oppressed, clearly. Yeah, these protests started happening. So where did all of this come from? What is it? What is the point of all of this? Why is our government, specifically the Biden administration and the Democratic Party, why are they allowing this? Because it's exactly what they want. Now, we've talked before about how the Democratic Socialists of America have at least 4 people in Congress that we know of and over 200 elected state officials. They are purposefully trying to infiltrate the government. They do want to destroy the Constitution and they want to have another constitutional Congress. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I was talking to someone and he said to me, can you think of any politician that is serving today that you would trust writing up a new constitution? Anyone? Can any of you guys think of one that you would trust and say, yeah, that person would have my best interest in mind? I can think of one, and that would be Thomas Massey. Everyone else, I think, yeah, they would be good in certain aspects, but do they truly have my best interests at heart? And would they represent my values and what I would want to see this country become? Maybe Tim Burchett. Yes, maybe Tim Burchett. Yeah. And Rand Paul. Yeah, that's true. Those are good ones. I would even say Marjorie Taylor Greene, because Marjorie, she's a loudmouth and a lot of people don't like her, but Marjorie is not there to make friends. And there was a beautiful interview with her, and I didn't really like her all that much until I saw that interview and I really saw what she was trying to accomplish and how she was really there to fight for the people and make sure that people were being represented in the way that they should be represented, that people were, that to come into Congress and flesh out just all of the shit that's there and really try to become what Congress should be. So even Marjorie, I'm going to go back and forth on that one a little bit, but I do like her. I wouldn't be upset if she was on, say, a Congress, like a Continental Congress group. Yeah, prefer the Constitution as is, as well as absolutely. I think there's nothing wrong with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They are perfect documents as they are. I 100% agree. But my point was the Democratic Socialists of America want to get rid of it. They want to have they want a pure democracy, which is mob rule. That's what a pure democracy is, mob rule. The majority rules. So you have something up for a vote and 51% of the people say, yeah, that's what we want. 49% of the people are shit out of luck. That's the reason. And it's not sustainable. Mob rule is not sustainable. And it's been shown time and time again for countries that have tried to become socialist or communist. Communist is a little bit of a different animal. It is a type of socialism, but it has more of a dictator at the head. So actually communism is probably a little more sustainable than socialism, but that's why the end result of socialism is always communism. And in fact, if you go on and look, we'll see today 2 sites that talk about socialism that are pro-socialist. They will say that themselves. Yeah, that communism is the end goal of socialism, really. So even though they start out saying we want to be, of the people, by the people, and for the people, literally of the people, pure democracy, it's not sustainable. And that's why they always end up having to go to communism. And they know that it's not sustainable. So yeah, let's take a look at this, because I can go on and on, but let's just take a look at this and see what it's saying. So this is a website. Let me see, make this maybe more like that. Okay, so the website is socialism101.com, basics. Now, there are a lot of other socialism sites that you can look up. This is a good sort of overview that gives you the basics, right? And so they're talking about what is socialism, what is Marxism, what is the difference between a social democracy and democratic socialism. We're not going to dig quite that deep today, but what is Marxism, right? So Marxism is a worldview and a method of societal analysis, as well as a collection of political and economic theories that were developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Marx focuses on class relations and societal conflict. So think about everything we just watched while you're listening to this. And think about if all of the stuff that we just watched and this sort of the state of our country today, if it sounds like this. So it uses a materialistic interpretation of historical development, so changing the history, and a dialectical view of social transformation. So that means two opposing forces. Dialectical is opposing forces. It can also be viewed as a conversation, but that's not how it's being used in this context. It is two opposing forces, the oppressor or the oppressed, or the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Marxist methodology uses economic and socio-political inquiry and applies that to the critique and analysis of the development of capitalism. So they're anti-capitalist. They think capitalists are the downfall of everything, and the role of the class struggle in systemic economic change. So think about everything that the Democrats are trying to do. The role of class struggle in systemic economic change. So think about why, January 6th, people reacted so harshly, but Black Lives Matter, where more people died, there was much more damage to the infrastructure in the United States. It happened for a much longer period of time. People were injured. All of that happened, and there were no real repercussions for that, because they saw that as a class struggle. And that in and of itself was the systemic economic change in their viewpoint, these democratic socialists. They think that is what is required in order to get to the point where the people can run the country. The people basically take over the country and run it mob rule, or as they call it, democracy. Whilst socialism and communism existed before Marx, he and Engels were the ones who turned the utopian dream of a perfect society into a practical science. So they came up with the theory about it. Okay, so what is what is communism? Communism is a social, political, and economic ideology and movement whose ultimate goal is the establishment of a communist society. And so if you think about a communist society, which is different than a communist state, but think of the root word, commune. So think of like hippie communes, that is a communist society. That is exactly what that is. Communist society is the last stage of socialism. So it is a stage of socialism. It's the last stage of socialism. From a materialistic perspective of history, see Marxism, it's defined as socio-economic structured upon the common ownership. So the common ownership of the means of production. So all of your factories, all of your businesses, everything is commonly owned in the absence of social classes, money, and estate. That's not exactly true, though, because someone has to run it, right? It's not, there has to be people in charge. So this is where socialists and communists sort of have a microscopic view when they really need to look at it from a macroscopic perspective. Somebody still has to run this. There is still a class of people that will be in charge of making sure everything is running smoothly, because otherwise it's just self-government, which it's never going to work. It's never going to work. You need some sort of structure in a society. The term communist society should be distinguished from communist state, like I said. So communist state is basically where there's a dictator at the realm, which tends to always happen. Marxism, Leninism. It tends to kind of always happen with communism. Why? Because everybody else is getting the same, and the people in charge have access to more. And so what happens? Power corrupts. We see it all of the time. It's part of human nature. I mean, it really is. Communist countries such as China, Cuba, Laos, Nepal, and Vietnam have never claimed to have achieved communism, but are communistic in the sense that their goal, or at least their stated goal, is the establishment of a communist society. So communists are socialists. Yes, all communists are socialists, but not all socialists are communists. Most socialists agree that theoretically communism should be the next mode of production after socialism. So anyone who says that socialists are not communists is true in some respects, but also incorrect, because communism is the ultimate goal of socialism. Socialism, the best way to think of socialism is that it is the transition between a capitalist state and a communist state. So socialism is that intermediary period. Yes, David Hurley is right. There has to be a central body to redistribute the wealth. And when you have that central body, you have consolidated power with no checks and balances. I think that's what you meant, no checks and balances, right? There's no way around corruption, especially when you don't recognize individual rights. That's a hallmark of a communist socialist society. That's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. And the thing people don't realize is you give up your individual rights in a socialist / communist society. You give up your individual rights. It's more for the good of the people. So the good of the what is it? What's the saying? The good of many outweigh the rights, the good of one, whatever. You know the saying I'm trying to think of. But that is exactly it. You give up your individual rights. You are not an individual. You are a cog in the machine of that society. And you get what you're given. You don't have the right to go further, because now you're becoming a capitalist. You know, if you want to keep what you make and you want to acquire more than maybe your neighbor, now you're a capitalist. Sorry. Do socialists advocate, oh my gosh, for democracy or a dictatorship? This is a really interesting question. And I want you, when we're reading this, I want you to keep in mind how we keep hearing that something is what do they keep saying? It'll destroy democracy. It is what's the term they keep saying? Everybody keeps saying okay, I wasn't asking you, but cool. My daughter goes, I don't know, my brain's not working. A threat to our democracy. That's what I keep trying to think of. A threat to our democracy. Yes, Captain Kirk said it. Thank you, Snoopy. The needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. Yes. Mr. Spock said the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Yes. So Mr. Spock was thinking in a communist perspective, whereas Captain Kirk was the capitalist. So a threat to our democracy. Keep that phrase in mind as we go through this. During no stage of socialism is a dictatorship necessary. Sure. Socialists do, however, advocate for so-called dictatorship of the proletariat. And keep in mind, the proletariat is the working class, the middle class, lower class, the working class. They're not the bourgeoisie, which should not be confused with an actual dictatorship. In Marxist theory, all societies have economic classes, which have economic classes, all have a dictatorship as one of those classes. In a capitalist society, the bourgeoisie class holds political power over the proletariat. So think of it in simplistic terms as the business owners and the workers within that business. The business owners would be the bourgeoisie and the workers would be the proletariat. And so capitalist society can be called a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. On the other hand, a socialist society is supposed to be ruled by the working class, the proletariat. So it's called the dictatorship of the proletariat, and that's accurate. As in rule of the working class. They make it sound nice, but it's mob rule. The dictatorship of the proletariat only exists in a socialist society, however. In a communist society, which is classless, there is not a dictatorship of any particular class. My question to them is, who runs it? Who runs it? If there is no class, who runs it? I mean, unless you're thinking of like a commune, but even in a commune, there's the people who are organizing it. So they are in effect running it. So who would run an entire nation that is communist, but has no dictatorship? They're using the term dictatorship in meaning who runs it, who has control over all of it. The government. Yeah, it's the government who would run it. Absolutely. Hey, Cassie. Democracy is mob rule, which is a socialist communist mindset. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. That said, many socialists believe that it's impossible to achieve socialism through bourgeois liberal parliamentary democracy because those systems are designed by the rich in order to keep the rich in power. So you see, this is the kind of mindset that is pervasive through these types of societal ideologies, is that they are looking at how the rich are in power and they are basically like keeping their foot on the neck of the poor, right? The poor being everybody else. But it is not true that socialists don't want democracy. In fact, socialists want more democracy than there already is. So when I say, think about how they say it's a threat to our democracy. This will be the death of democracy. They're trying to destroy democracy. This is why they're taking on that term and using it so much, because they're trying to ingrain it in your brain that democracy is the be all end all. And when in reality, we're a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. The founding fathers did not want this to be a democracy. In fact, they wanted the democratic process to be limited. They wanted the people to elect their representatives, and those representatives would then act on their behalf. And we've talked about this before, which is that they felt that the kind of the average person was busy worrying about their everyday lives, which we are, right? You're worried about the cost of gas. You're worried about the cost of groceries. You got to, make your payments. You got to take care of your animals in your house and your children and all of those things that you need to do in your everyday life and your jobs. And so if you're, say, a teacher at a middle school, you don't have time to worry about running the nation. So that is why the forefathers wanted these elected representatives. Those were the people who, that was their job to think about from a macroscopic view, because those of us, if it's just kind of the average person who's in power, you're going to think about things very differently than you would from a national perspective, right? You kind of have to have a bigger overview when you're thinking about legislature for the country. And so that's why they didn't want a pure democracy. They wanted it to be limited in its democratic principles. Where were we? Socialists want true democracy, where every individual's vote and opinion truly matters. Socialists don't just want more direct democracy, i.e., allowing the population to directly control how their country is run, rather than letting them vote for a representative, like we just talked about, that super promises to vote in their interest, but is under no real obligation to actually do so. Right, the control is that you don't have to keep voting them back into their role, but also allow for democratic control of means of production. And this is really where the key is. And most people, again, who are thinking in terms of how socialism is a wonderful thing, aren't thinking about this. So that is, allow all workers to democratically decide how their place of work is run, what is produced, how much it should sell for, and so on. So imagine that. Imagine you've got an entire country where the people are going to decide what needs to be produced. So one, how does the average person know how much of something needs to be produced? How are they going to know that? How are they going to know when it should be produced, how much it should sell for? And by the way, the person who created that business no longer owns it. So these democratic socialists of America, and I'm using them because that's the group that we know has infiltrated the government. If you look on their website, which we have before, and I highly suggest you go back and watch it if you haven't seen it, they want the workers to become the owners of businesses that are already currently existing. So if you're a business owner, sorry, you lose your business and becomes common property. And now your workers get to say how your place of business should be run, because again, it's no longer your place of business. It's now state owned. But again, they're not thinking about who's the state, who's running the state. And this is getting in, was Germany socialistic? It was not, even though it was the socialist. It had socialist in the name, but I think Hitler actually didn't like socialism. It was capitalism. Would no one be allowed to own anything under communism? If you're afraid the communists are going to break into your home and take your Xbox because private property has been abolished, you can sleep easy knowing that private property is not the same as personal property. Okay, let's see how they're differentiating. Private property refers to means of production, factories, machinery, etc., whereas personal property refers to the things you, the common person, own. Your house, your car, your Xbox are all personal property and belong to you. The Democratic Socialists of America would disagree. They want to abolish personal property. They don't want anyone to have. So they would probably think this page right here is way too liberal for them. They want to go even further left. Would janitors and doctors be paid the same under communism, ignoring the possibility that unimportant positions such as janitor might not even exist in a communist society, and that the duty of cleaning up would be shared among the people within a certain community, like a workplace or neighborhood, for example? The short answer is that communist society does away with wage labor and the concept of exchanging labor for payment altogether. This is expressed through the principle of from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. So here's the question, right? Here's where we get into the conflicts. So they just said you would be allowed to have personal property, because personal property is not private property. And in their minds, private property actually means property of the state. But you would be able to have personal property. However, if they want to do away with wages, how do you then acquire personal property? How do you then pay for a car? How do you pay for your house? You don't. The state gives it to you. And then they're getting into the whole Star Trek reference, which a lot of them love to use. Let's see, where was the other? There's one other part I wanted to. They're talking about how, oh, well, socialism doesn't and communism doesn't work. And then they're saying every time it has been attempted, the US, look at this, the US has intervened either directly through war against socialist countries. And they're going through the Korean War, the Lebanon crisis, the Bay of Pigs, Simba Rebellion, the Vietnam War, communist insurgency in Thailand, multinational forces in Lebanon, invasion of Grenada, or having the CIA. It's always the U.S. The U.S. is the big bad guy in socialism and communism. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that the U.S. is without guilt in many of these things, if not all. Capitalism has to go. How do we do that? The answer to this will vary greatly depending on the conditions of whatever country you live in. Everywhere is different. And not just the road to socialism, but the socialist system itself will vary depending on the conditions of where it's implemented. Socialism in Cuba will inevitably work different from socialism in, for example, China. So is to find like-minded people and coordinate with them, sort of like these groups of protesters, right? You'd be surprised at how much a small group of dedicated socialists can achieve, for example, city councils. And that's why the Democratic Socialists of America, it is their goal to get as many people elected to, or as many people into elected office as possible. So they are trying to infiltrate. If there is a socialist party or organization in your area, I encourage you to seek them out. They may not adhere to your specific tendency of socialism, and you may have ideological disagreements with them, but working together is always better than working alone. In America, for example, very few people bother to show up to city council meetings. A seemingly small group of people can make a large impact by simply showing up and making the case for pro-worker policies, citywide public transport, for example. Simple welfare policies that may seem like incrementalism and a waste of time can afford working people more bargaining power. It's in the interest of the bourgeoisie to keep a portion of the working class unemployed, the reserve army of labor, as Marx called it, and desperate for money to buy food and pay rent. Desperate workers are willing to take jobs with bad working conditions and poor wages, so long as the money is enough just to keep them alive. So if, say, Americans feel they're too good to take on those jobs, what could we possibly do to make sure we have that workforce of people who will pick produce and clean hotel rooms, as the Democrats have put it? Oh, I don't know. Maybe we just open up the border and allow an invasion of illegal immigrants in. They'll be willing to work for anything. But the less desperate the workers are, plus it creates more competition within the working class. So people are going to be more willing to take on lesser roles than they would normally. Though unemployment benefits, for instance, or public transport, public health care, public college, anything that saves workers time and money, the less likely they are to accept poor working conditions, and the more likely they are to consider unionization and political activism. Socialism won't be established overnight, but the way to get there is use every means possible to strengthen the socioeconomic position of the proletariat. In the timeless words of Karl Marx, the communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends will be attained only by the forcible overthrow of existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at communistic revolution. The proletariat have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite. Well, I would say the United States Democratic Socialists have no problem concealing their views and aims, because what they have done is hidden them and pretended to be progressive liberals in order to become elected. And again, if you go onto the Democratic Socialists of America website, you will see them talking about this, say, in their newsletters. They talk about whether or not they should be ousting certain representatives, elected representatives who don't go along with what they're trying to accomplish. And the argument has been, yes, like some people say, yes, we should oust them. And I think they did that to Jamal Bowman, but I think he's back in, not 100% sure. But the others say, no, we can't do that, because then we will, these people who are already in elected office, we don't want them turning away from us because we're being too radical. Let's get more people in office, and then we can become more radical. Then we can get rid of liberalism and move to socialism. So that is where we are at now. Now that the lesson is over, I want to play for you what Chuck Schumer said after the vote for the foreign aid package was passed today. And I want you to keep in mind everything we just went through and think about that while you're listening to what he's saying. Okay, so this was literally right after the vote.
Majority Leader.
Could we have some order, please, Mr. President?
The people
Members will
need
take
order.
their conversations outside.
Mr. President, today, the Senate sends a unified message to the entire world. America will always defend democracy in its hour of need. We tell our allies, we will stand with you. We tell our adversaries, don't mess with us. We tell the world, we will do everything to defend democracy and our way of life. In a resounding bipartisan vote, the relentless work of 6 long months has paid off. Congress is sending the supplemental to President Biden's desk. Getting this done was one of the greatest achievements the Senate has faced in years, perhaps decades. A lot of people inside and outside the Congress wanted this package to fail. But today, those in Congress who stand on the side of democracy are winning the day. To our friends in Ukraine, to our allies in NATO, to our allies in Israel, and to civilians around the world in need of help, help is on the way. To our friends in Ukraine, America will deliver more ammo and air defenses and basic supplies that you need to resist Putin on the battlefield. To our friends in Israel, America will soon deliver aid to help you fight the scourge of Hamas and stand up to Iran. To innocent civilians in the midst of the war, in the midst of war, from Gaza to Sudan, America will deliver food and medicine and clothing. And to our friends in the Indo-Pacific, we will stand with you to resist the Chinese Communist Party. And to the whole world, make no mistake, America will deliver on its promise to act like a leader on the world stage, to hold the line against autocratic thugs like Vladimir Putin. A few months ago, Putin made a bet that American aid would sooner or later come to an end. We are showing Putin that betting against America is always, always a grave mistake. Over the past few months, I've spoken repeatedly and at length about the supreme importance of getting this supplemental package done. Starting in October and through Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and into the spring, I said again and again that we had to work in a bipartisan way, Democrats and Republicans alike, if we wanted to pass this bill. And when we succeeded in getting the supplemental through the Senate the first time in February, it was for 2 reasons above all: persistence and bipartisanship. At certain points, it might have seemed hard to see how we'd reach our goal, but we never lost hope that if we persisted, we could finish the job. Today, thank God, our persistence has been validated. The bill the Senate sent to us by the House is largely the same as the bill in substance as what the Senate has championed all along. It wasn't easy to reach this point.
Yeah, in other words, they got exactly.
Today's outcome yet confirms another thing we've stressed from the beginning of this Congress. In divided government, the only way to ever get things done is bipartisanship. I'm very pleased that in this moment, when it mattered most, both parties found a way to work together, even when it wasn't easy. Again, persistence and bipartisanship is what saved the day. Leader McConnell and I, who don't always agree, worked hand in hand and shoulder to shoulder to get this bill done. Together, we were bipartisan and persistent.
Remember,
now it's troubling that a very small minority within the hard right tried desperately for months to prevent Congress from doing the right thing. These isolationists have now secured their ignominious place in history as the ones who'd see America stick its head in the sand as our enemies sought to undermine us. Had they won, they would have presided over a declining America. I'm glad that today we will see that effort fail. This is an inflection point in history. Western democracy perhaps faced its greatest test since the end of the Cold War. The conflicts we see right now in Europe, in the Middle East, and the tensions of the Indo-Pacific will go a long way in shaping the balance of power between democracy and autocracy in the decades to come. And the consequences for America's long-term security will be profound. If Putin's allowed to seize the territory of a neighboring sovereign nation, if Chinese Communist Party is allowed to consume the Indo-Pacific, if Iran is allowed to dominate the Middle East, and if America were to stand by and do nothing, it is the United States that would suffer the consequences most of all in the long run. Failure to act now could not only undermine the legitimacy of our democratic values, it would have impacts across American life. It would hurt us politically, economically, militarily, and socially. It would harm the competitiveness of U.S. businesses, endanger the safety of our troops, cripple America's innovative potential, and make the world a more hostile place for our civic values: individual liberty, freedom of expression, equal justice under law, and opportunity for all. We always try to live up to these ideals, but they will not survive if autocratic powers like Putin and the Chinese Communist Party overtake America in this century. That's what's at stake in the war in Ukraine, where we face Putin. That's what's at stake in the war in Indochina. That's what's at stake in Indochina, where we face Xi. That's what's at stake in conflicts in the Middle East, where we face Iran. Nothing less than the future of American security and the future of the democratic order that has survived since the end
The
of the
Democratic
Second World War. So we have a choice. We can either make a down payment on defending our security or finding ourselves on the back foot, facing much graver threats in years and decades to come. The only answer is the right one. We must act now. We have learned in recent years that democracy is a fragile and precious thing. It will not survive the threats of this century, the new threats, if we aren't willing to do what it takes to defend it. And if America will not lead the way to project democracy in this age, no other nation will. That is the burden, that is the duty of a nation as great as ours. There are so many people on both sides of the aisle who deserve credit for this immense accomplishment. I thank President Biden for his stalwart leadership. He never flinched or winced. He knew how important this was and was always working with us and importuning us to move forward. I thank Leader McConnell, as I've mentioned before, working hand in hand with us, not letting partisanship get in the way. I thank Speaker Johnson, who rose to the occasion. In his own words, said he had to do the right thing despite the enormous political pressure on him. And I thank Leader Jeffries, who worked so well together in his bipartisan way with Speaker Johnson. And let me say this once again about my friend, the Republican leader. We were of one mind to get this bill done. It was our bipartisanship, the linking of arms together, that got this large and difficult bill through the Congress, despite many political ideologues who wanted to bring it down. Bipartisanship once again prevailed, and I thank him for his leadership. I want to thank my Senate colleagues, particularly in my caucus. The dedication and unity and strength that you have shown has made this possible. I was able, as leader, to work with the Republican leader in the House, the Speaker, the minority leader in the House, and the President, because I knew I had our full caucus behind us, strongly, fervently. The speeches that we heard at our Tuesday lunches, made by many who are sitting here, would make every American proud. And I thank you for that. For the past 6 months, our friends and allies across the world have been watching what's been going on in Congress and asking themselves the same thing. Will America stand by her friends to face down the forces of autocracy? Will America follow through on its commitment to be a leader on the world stage and safeguard the cause of democracy? Will America summon the strength to come together, overcome the centrifugal pull of partisanship, and rise once again to meet the magnitude of the moment? Today, with both parties working together, the Senate answers these questions with a thunderous and resounding yes. I yield the floor.
Okay. So, what did you guys think of that? Yeah. Intergalactic Angler saying, can you imagine being a high school kid in social studies or history? Shaking my head. No wonder kids are messed up. Yeah, they are literally indoctrinating these kids. We heard the New York University professor talking about it. It's it's because of what they've taught them. They've taught them that, you know, they need to view it through the lens of oppressor versus oppressed, and that usually the white man is the oppressor. And you know, that's exactly what Marxism is, right? The bourgeoisie are the oppressors and the proletariat are the oppressed. It's the same thing, different words. So it's no surprise that these kids are behaving the way that they are, because this is what they've trained them to do. This is what they've groomed them to do, really. So you heard Chuck Schumer gloating and talking about how amazing it was that they've preserved democracy, which is ironic when you hear what I'm going to show you next. So prior to the vote, these were the last two senators today that spoke before the Senate. And I want you to hear what they have to say. So it's Senator Eric Schmidt and Senator Mike Lee? Mike Lee, I think it's his name. I'm losing it. But Eric Schmidt, I don't have the full thing of what he said, which was excellent. But I didn't want it to go too long. So let me show you what they were saying today. So keep in mind, this was before the vote, before Chuck Schumer said what he said, when he kept saying how bipartisan it was. And it was wonderful they were able to do this. And thankfully, they came together in a bipartisan fashion to pass this. Keep that in mind as you listen to these two senators.
And actually voted on this stuff for 4 or 5 hours. We could get through a lot, but the senator from New York is allergic to work unless he can control the outcome. Or say, if you object now, everyone has to, you know, they change their plans last minute. Or if you don't support this without an opportunity to affect it, you're against, pick the poison. You want to shut down the government. Or you're for Putin. All these ridiculous things that get thrown out here. Open it up. And I'll tell you why it won't happen, because it's a real threat. It's a threat to him. Because the idea that other senators who aren't part of, you know, the two that get to make all the calls, that we would find a different way. That's a threat to his power. Because right now he gets to say, come to me with everything. I'll put it in some omnibus. There won't be any time to debate it. They probably won't be able to read it. But if they don't vote for it, you want to shut down the government. So to all the senators, I would like to work with you to dislodge this concentration of power that no doubt our founders would be rolling in their graves over. This diffusion of power that's defined by our separation of powers and federalism was meant to spread it out, to protect individual liberty. It certainly was never intended for one person in the Senate who can always be recognized, and like last week, did something that had never happened in the history of our republic, which was to dismiss articles of impeachment, even though we're supposed to have a trial. Now, granted, he had accomplices in that. Every single Democrat voted with him. But he's recognized first. He can fill the tree. There are no amendments. We have to beg to be heard, which is why I objected to that farce last week. I don't think it's becoming of United States senators to say, oh, thank you, Senator Schumer, for giving me 2 minutes to speak. Anyway, there's a better way. It's playing out again here today because we are essentially taking what the House gives us. The upper chamber is capitulating to the House to say, we can't actually affect this thing. We can't change anything. And if you do it, pick the poison. You're threatening the security of another country or something ridiculous. So with that, Mr. President, I would just hope that this is a clarion call for reform. The Senate is broken. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.
Mr. President.
Senator from Utah.
Mr. President, I echo and endorse the
Accurate.
wise comments just uttered by my friend and colleague, the distinguished senator from Missouri. What we're witnessing here is the destruction of the legislative process in the Senate. The Senate's here today preparing to vote on one of the most significant pieces of legislation this entire Congress. That is on a bill to send nearly $100 billion overseas, and senators are unable even to offer an amendment to that bill. By filling the amendment tree this afternoon, the majority leader has prevented every single member of this body from offering amendments to the legislation, any efforts to improve it. If we want to have any amendment considered, we have to beg the majority leader to let it come before the full Senate for a vote. Now, you may remember that just a couple of months ago, we were in a very similar position on a very, very similar bill. Senator Schumer promised a fair and open amendment process on the National Security Supplemental in February of this year. But not one amendment, not a single amendment was considered on the Senate floor. Republicans filed over 150 proposed amendments to improve the bill, but not one vote on a single one of those amendments or any other was allowed. Why? Why?
Nothing like democracy.
Well, Senator Schumer blocked every amendment from even being considered by filling the amendment tree. That blocked all of the other 99 senators from participating meaningfully in that process. Now, why wouldn't he want amendments? That is, after all, the hallmark characteristic of what defines us as a body. It's why we call ourselves the world's greatest deliberative legislative body. So why wouldn't he want those? Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that an amendment might point to some of the weaknesses in the bill, some of the defects of the bill. It might prompt members to, I don't know, slow down and ask whether this is a prudent idea to send a lot of humanitarian aid to Gaza, up to $9.5 billion of it that could go there, with minimal guardrails, where Hamas will with certainty seize it to wage war against Israel. Or if the U.S. taxpayer should be footing the bill for quote unquote gender advisors in Ukraine's military, should they really vote for a bill that does this? That's what an amendment forces all of us to ask ourselves and decide on one particular question or another. But leadership in the Senate wants to avoid these thorny questions that might rock the boat. Leadership wants to ram this bill through the Senate with minimal debate and perhaps no amendments, because they know that aspects of it, especially the $60 billion for Ukraine, are massively controversial with the American people, those who elected us, those who pay taxes to fund these efforts. Now, my colleagues and I are working in good faith to reach a unanimous consent agreement to bring forward a handful of amendments and set up a standalone vote in exchange for expediting the passage of the bill. We nearly had that agreement locked in late Friday night. An agreement to vote on just 2 amendments and 1 standalone bill. But a couple of senators on the other side of the aisle panicked and started objecting to any and all agreements. They panicked because they knew that one of those items set up as part of the UC, the standalone legislation to redesignate the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization, this amendment offered up by my friend and colleague, the senator from Texas, might actually pass. Remember, this is the same entity that's been firing on U.S. forces in the region and those of our allies, and yet they couldn't let that happen. Democrats will agree only to amendments that they find politically palatable or no, will not pass.
Okay, so I mean, there's a lot to digest there, right? So Eric Schumer, basically, they were saying the same thing, but both talked about how with this, I'm just going to call it a bill, even though it was a group of bills that then got grouped together. They were not allowed to bring any amendments forward for the bill, meaning they can't change it. It is what it is. And Chuck Schumer was the one who determined that. And then they were just talking about in general, if they wanted to bring amendments forward in anything, they have to beg Chuck Schumer to allow him or to get him to allow a bill to be brought to the floor to vote. And in February, he had said they could have amendments on the national spending bill. And again, none of those amendments were allowed to be brought to the floor for a vote. So, And the Democrats are brilliant in the fact that they all stick together, right? They all play together well. Even if they don't agree with it, I think they still vote together because they're looking at a different agenda. And so they know it's in their best interest to stay together. The Republicans, not as great at that. Not as great at that, for sure. But hopefully they'll figure it out, right? But you can hear Chuck Schumer saying, what a win this was for democracy. Democracy was at stake. And we worked on this in a bipartisan fashion. And how amazing that we finally came together. And those few pesky Republicans that were trying to stop this, the world is going to see them for the villains that they are. History will know they were the villains here. All the while, you have other senators saying, that's not true. And he said that right after these guys. They did the vote, and then Chuck Schumer gave his speech. So he was kind of like giving them the finger at the same time when he was like, what a bipartisan success this was. Democracy was saved. Hallelujah. Well, they wouldn't say hallelujah. That's way too Christian. Well, Chuck Schumer is Jewish, but the gall of this man to talk about democracy, the threat to democracy, when he himself is impeding democracy in the Senate by not allowing amendments to be voted on, by not allowing people to vote on anything but what he wants them to vote on and what he knows will pass. Does that sound like democracy to you? It doesn't to me. To me, that sounds like authoritarianism. To me, that sounds like a dictator. Now, granted, Chuck Schumer is not in charge of the entire country, thankfully, because he's the most annoying voice in the world, for one thing. I mean, that's the slightest of the issues with him. But he's not allowing them to have a voice. He's not allowing them really to have a vote, because if he's only allowing to come forward what he knows will pass and what he wants to pass, and think about what Mike Lee said. He said there were a couple of Democrats that were on board with them on Friday, whatever the amendment or whatever proposal that they had the votes. They had some Democrats that were on board with them, but those Democrats got scared and said, no, not voting with you. We're voting with Democrats. What were they scared of? Why were they scared? Were they saying, we kind of have to do this? So to me, again, that sounds like a dictatorship. Why are they scared to vote against their party? Because if you look at Senate votes, every single one that I've watched, and I haven't watched as many, I'll be honest, I haven't watched as many as the House, but every single one that I've watched recently, it is down party lines. 100%. It's like 51% Democrats, 49 Republicans, and they each vote down their party lines. There's no deviation. None of the Democrats side with anything that the Republicans are asking. And they're not asking for, these huge and extravagant and just completely ridiculous amendments. A lot of them are common sense amendments, like, okay, well, if we give this money to the Ukraine, how do we know what they're spending it on? Shouldn't there be someone kind of overseeing this and making sure that the money is getting spent in the way that it was supposed to? Because we know a lot of these Ukrainian officials are all of a sudden in these big giant houses. And I think it was either Zelensky or it was one other Ukrainian official bought like a condo in Dubai recently. And yet they're begging, saying they need this money for the war and, Ukraine is at risk. Where's the money that we gave you? We already gave you like $100 billion. What happened to it? What are you doing with that? Not only that, but other European countries step up a little bit. Like, why do we have to give them all the money? So these are things that the Republicans were asking, but Chuck Schumer didn't like those things. And so those things were never allowed to be brought to the floor to vote on. And so when you hear him say, oh, democracy, it's a victory for democracy. Democracy won out. We saved democracy. Did you really? No. So this is the irony of the socialist movement, is that they say they're doing it for the people, right? They are the champion of the people. But in reality, they are more corrupt than a constitutional republic, because there's no there are no safeguards. I think Dave Hurley said it earlier. There's no safeguards in a socialist or communist. Ooh, I just bit the inside of my mouth. Or no safeguards in a socialist or communist society. It always leads to a dictatorship. Inevitably, it has always, within history, always led to a dictatorship. It has never survived because one, mob rule just doesn't work. People are crazy. Let's be honest. Like, it doesn't work. And two, it always becomes corrupted and becomes more of a authoritarian type state than it is a commune. Can you imagine a giant nation-sized hippie commune? That's what they're wanting. Something like that. How well you think that's going to work? It's not. It's just not. Okay, so Snoop brought something up, and it's funny because I had it all keyed up, so I'm going to show it to you really quick. It's a fast one, but it's just disgusting, but something you need to see. These Democrats, that are working for the people, even though the majority of the American people don't want to give more money to the Ukraine. But here we go, Zelensky in his shabby little house, or wherever he is at. I don't really care.
Hello, sir. Bill Keating from Massachusetts.
So
I have something.
A representative from Massachusetts. This is after the House vote.
That you're really going to like. Yeah. This is the official tally of the vote.
Yes, I see.
For the supplemental aid.
Yes.
And look at that vote. 73%.
Yes. Thank you so much. 73.
That's a good vote.
Good, very good. Thank you very much.
He just gave him the names of every representative that voted or did not vote for that bill to pass. He flew to the Ukraine specifically to give him a list of how everyone in the House voted on the Ukraine bill. Yeah, there's nothing shady about that whatsoever. I mean, that's crazy. Sarah's speaking of crazy. Well, guys, that's pretty much it. Actually, no, I do have one more thing. I wanted to end on something funny for you because, most of what we've been talking about is just like, and dreary and just gross. And I found this hilarious. Now, warning, if you don't have a sense of humor, you're not going to like this. Also, warning, if you don't have a sense of humor, you probably shouldn't be here on this channel. So this is Roseanne, who is hilarious. And deep-rooted corruption. Absolutely. And she was in Bergdorf with her, I think it was with her son, because I think he says mom in the beginning, like, what mom? Or something like that. Are you okay, mom? But this was hilarious. And so for those of you that know the E. Jean Carroll Trump case, this is in reference to that. And I was cracking up when I saw it. So I thought I'd share it with you guys because it's really funny. I thought it was. Okay, here we go.
What happened, Mom? We're at Bergdorf. Are you okay? You look very sick.
No, I'm not okay because I just had a horrible flashback, a horrible memory. Right now, I realize that 26 years ago, Joe Biden raped me right here in that dressing room in the shoe department where I went in to change my shoes.
Oh my God.
He raped me in here. Joe Biden. He raped me right here in the shoe department at Bergdorf Goodman.
Are you okay?
No, I'm not. I need to sue. I need to sue.
What
No,
happened,
I'm
Mom?
not. I need to sue. It's brilliant. But it's like, it shows the ridiculousness of everything that's going on. Um, it's not real. It's not real. Uh, but it just shows the insanity of what is going on right now. I mean, the Trump trials, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Like, I was looking at adding some of those things in there. I thought it was hilarious. Come on. The woman is speaking common sense through humor. Like, she's just like, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous that this was even a case. In fact, she remembered more than Eugene Carroll did, and Roseanne's just making it up. But super funny. I thought that was hilarious. So if that offended any of you, oh, sorry, not really. But so that was it. That is it. But it made me laugh. I thought it was funny. She got into it too. She's like, "You okay? No, I need to sue. No, I'm not okay." I was like, brilliant. Bravo, brilliant. It was awesome. I loved it. So speaking of things I'm excited about. Oh, good. I'm glad you guys thought that was funny. Bradley thought it was weird, but that's okay. It was funny. Not easily offended. You can't be. You can't be here on this channel. You cannot be easily offended. Oh, Bubby might make an appearance. Little kitty. Hi, buddy. Okay, so you guys know I was talking about how we've been looking for a new gun for me. I'm so excited because I got one over the weekend and we went to the range and oh, hey, Hellfire, thank you so much. That's so nice. Thank you. It'll go towards ammunition. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Let's give you a little thank you sign. How about a smiley face one? Thanks. Oh, it covers up me. There we go. Thanks. Oh, thank you so much. That's so awesome. We have feelings and are human sometimes. Get out then. Get out. Not here. I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm just kidding. Thank you so much, Hellfire. I really appreciate it. Like I said, it'll go to the ammo fund. That's awesome. But I got a new gun, and Hellfire knows this because he and I were texting about it yesterday. But and for those of you that are concerned, gun people, not to worry, it's empty. But oh, there we go. I got it. Isn't she pretty? So I ended up getting a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield Plus, and it's awesome. It's awesome. It's tiny, but it has, I think this is the 13 rounds plus one in the chamber. So the red paint is awesome. Oh yeah, you're talking about on the it's on the magazine, the top of the magazine. It's red, but she's so pretty. And we spent all weekend at the range because of this. And I was so excited. It was so fun. So we have been talking about doing some gun shows. So because Dave and I both love them. Hi, bud. So yeah, so we're gonna try and figure out how we want to do that. Definitely some shows talking about guns. Like I said, I talked to my friend Paul, who's a detective, and we're going to talk about sort of gun laws, Ohio gun law specifically, because he works here. And then we want to do some shooting videos too. We thought that would be really fun to like take you guys out. I don't think those would be live just because they can be so loud, obviously, and we got to figure out how we want to do that. But definitely some shooting videos and talking a little bit more about guns because it's something that Dave and I both really love. Run. Nah, he's good. He's good. Oh my gosh. The AR-15 that the Military Arms Channel was using shot 8,000 plus bullets without cleaning, had one misfire. That's amazing. That's amazing. Oh, the painting behind you is awesome. Which one? The hold on, let me take down Eggy for a second. The possum. Is that the one you're talking about? 9mm bullets you use from the count of the bullets. Yes, 9mm. That's right. Yeah, so super fun. Super fun. We had a great time. Yes, the possum. Yeah, we got that down in New Orleans. So yes, that's the benevolent sesame and the child starfish of the candy corn or something like that is the name of it. It's hilarious. But anyways, so excited. Love my new gun. I love her. And so much fun to shoot. For those of you that likes guns, if you haven't tried a Smith & Wesson M&P, any of them, I also love the 2.0. That's going to be my next one. It's much bigger, so obviously not as easy for concealed carry, but the Shield Plus is great. I mean, as you can see, it's tiny, and yeah, 13 in the magazine plus 1 in the chamber, so 14 altogether. This is the more kind of like extended mag. They also have a flush one that has 10, so you can do 10 plus 1 in the chamber. It's empty, Chris. Don't be nervous. Nothing in it. Nothing in it. For those that didn't see, it's empty. Nothing in it. So fun. I'm going to take her shooting one of these days. She's going to have a blast with it. I know she will. So the more I hear, the more I know you're batshit. Well, you know, batshit or just really smart. Just really, really practical. You know, it is. West Virginia is open carry. That's cool. Yeah, a lot of places. Well, we are constitutional carry here. And like I said, we're going to have Paul on, so we'll be able to talk more about Ohio gun laws. Lynn's got a gun, like JD's got a gun. Or was that Aerosmith, or was that no, was that was somebody else? Who was it that I'm thinking of? Was it? Yeah, maybe it was Aerosmith. Janie's got a gun. Yeah, it's been a while since I've heard that song. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yes, well, we are armed in this house, so yes, but I did get a new one. Yay! And so we're both already like, yeah, we want this one and this one next. So, but lots of fun. So, oh, Nevada's open carry too. That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me. I don't know if does it bother any of you guys? If you're out and you see someone carrying a gun, does it bother you? Oh, it doesn't bother me at all, especially if it's open carry, because usually, like, if they're going to have it on like their hip or whatever, chances are they're not going out to shoot up something because they're walking around with it on them. Yeah, I know that song's in my head now too. Is Arizona open carry? Yeah, Arizona is very gun friendly. I do know that about Arizona because we watch Fridays with Frank. And if you guys don't watch that YouTube channel, check out the Pinal County Sheriff's. I think it's the Pinal County Sheriff's Department. If you just do a search for Fridays with Frank on YouTube, you'll find it and you'll thank me because it's hilarious. So yeah. Look for Fridays with Frank if you haven't ever watched that on YouTube. It's so funny. But they do talk about, how Arizona is gun friendly. He's from New York and that's why he moved down there. He's a police officer. But so fun. So anyways, so very excited to have some gun shows coming up for you guys. I think that'll be a blast and something fun, right? Like we talk about politics. Politics is just so heavy. And, oftentimes you're just like, ugh. I know I am. Like, by the end of the day, you're just like, oh my gosh, like everything sucks, and it's really hard. So you got to find ways to just like kind of release some of that negative energy, and going to a shooting range is a wonderful way to do that. Please do it at a range. But be responsible, obviously, responsible and safe. But it's so much fun, and it's such a great way to kind of just have that like release, that like really fun time. And if you're new to it, there are a lot of people who can teach you. So definitely look into it or think about it. It's a lot of fun. Oh, I know, XJ, because you're in Michigan, right? I need a note from the sheriff to carry, which is ridiculous. And was it you who was telling us that like they're only open on certain days at certain times now, and that they wanted to do it from like on one day a week for like 3 hours or something crazy, and then people got all pissed off, and so they did it for like 4 days a week for 4 hours or something. But yeah, that's craziness. It's unconstitutional. Can we go squatching afterwards? I meant, yeah, absolutely. We could go shooting and squatching. I ain't ever going into the woods without a sword with you two broads. Oh, did Coleon do a show on the Michigan thing? Did he? So if you guys, those of you who are 2A advocates, if you haven't watched Coleon Noir's channel, he's awesome. He's a lawyer, 2A advocate. He also talks about shootings that have been saved by people who are carrying. So you hear a lot of the stuff that you won't hear on mainstream media because obviously they don't want to talk about all of that because that goes against them wanting to have more gun control. If you talk about people saving other people, God forbid. So yeah, definitely go check out Coleon Noir if you guys are 2A advocates, or even if you're just curious about them. He has a lot of really informational shows because he talks about it from the perspective of being a lawyer. So really, really interesting. There's the other guy, I can't remember his name. Maybe you do, Dave. He's the other lawyer, but he talks more about, I think he talks more about guns than he does about the laws, like the political side of things. Coleon talks about all of it. And yeah, he's awesome. Great merch too. Super good stuff. Dave has some of it. Yes, Hellfire has a Springfield XD9. That's awesome. That is awesome. What else? Do any of you guys have any guns? What do you have? Let us know. Participate. Let's make it a group activity. Yeah, you like the shooting and squatching? We'll make an episode where we go shooting and squatching. I think so. Yeah. It sounds fun to me. Sounds fun to me. So anyway, yeah, that's it. That's it. I know what kind of gun Chris has. I do. I don't know if she's still here, but I know what she's got because we've got one of those too. Now be nice. He's been here. Armed Scholars. I think that's the guy. I think that might be the guy that was that the guy that I was thinking of? I can't remember. It might be him. No, Armed Scholars is I think he's a different guy that we watched. Or maybe, yeah, I think we saw one of, I don't know if it's just one guy or more than one. We saw one of their videos the other day. That's why I'm thinking of them. No, the other guy I'm thinking of, I think he's down in Florida. And I can't for the life of me remember his name. There's a lot of really good gun channels if you're interested in guns or anything like that. There's the Warrior Poet Society. I think that's the name of it. They're really good. She Equips Herself. That's a really good channel. Obviously the woman who does it, she does most of the shows. And so if you're a woman who's interested in gun, great one to go to. But she also has her husband, Mac, who is I think he's a cop still, but he's been a gun instructor for 20 years. He was also in the military. And so he gives a lot of really great advice. Really, really good channel to check out. So yeah, there's a lot of really good ones. A Colt Python 1911 and some other stuff around here. Those are cool. That's awesome. I love hearing about what everybody has. Like, I would love to find out, like, what do you have and why do you have it? Right? Because sometimes it's just getting the gun. Like, I would suggest, like, if you're in the market for a gun, to go try a bunch of different ones. And like when we were looking at this, so the range that we are members to, they have like a deal on Tuesdays where it's like you rent one and you can get, I think, 3 free rentals. So you can basically rent four guns for the price of one to try out at the range. So if you're in the market for one, go to a range, see if they have deals like that, and you can try out a bunch of different ones, because that's really how you're going to know what you like, what works best with you. There's a lot of other factors, but again, we can get into all of that kind of stuff on another show if we ever want to. The states with open carry gun laws, you rarely ever hear of riots or protests of cars. Yeah, I mean, definitely the states that have the stricter gun laws tend to have more crime. There is a higher correlation of crime and stricter gun laws for sure. Well, I mean, you're probably not going to do as much if you know you have more of a chance of getting shot, right? SoCal says, my dad was an Army marksman, so he got us started early into competition shooting and target. Oh, that would be fun. That would be fun. I would like to do that. I'm super competitive, so I think that would be a lot of fun, and that's something that I would love to do. That's really cool, though. But yeah, I get very competitive just with myself when we're at the range. Like each time I shoot, I want it to be better than the last one. So we'll see. It's just fun too. So I think it's great. All right, guys. Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Thanks for chatting. And thank you again, Hellfire, for the $2 super sticker. That was so nice of you. I really appreciate it. And like I said, it will go to the ammo fund so we can go to the range more. And yeah, some fun stuff in the works for you guys. So yeah, that is gonna be it, I think. I hope you have a wonderful night, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
You down on the softly spoken words and notions that delight, but you're right down the path I know too well. You're right, but in my head there's a picture of me finding who I am and who I should be. I've lost myself in the insanity. I'm now I'm finally free. Slow me down, though the past is broken. Hope has opened a new bright, but you're right down the path I know too well. You're right. But in my head there's a picture of me finding who I am and who I should be. I've lost myself in the insanity. I'm out on a limb, now I'm finally free. But in my head there's a picture of me finding who I am and who I should be. I've lost myself in the insanity. I'm out, now I'm finally free. I'm out on a limb, and in my head I'm out on a limb, and in my head I'm out on a limb, and in my head I'm out on a limb. I've lost myself.